So, time travel is real. Actually, you're traveling through time right now. With every second of this video, you move 1 second into the future. But there's one person on Earth who has managed to time travel a little further into the future, 0.02 of a second. And that's not the limit. Meet Sergei Krikalev. He's an astronaut who spent 803 days, 9 hours, and 39 minutes on the International Space Station. That's the key to his time travel. The point is that for two objects, one standing still and the other moving, time flow is different. That is, if we take our planet as one object and the ISS as the other, time on Earth and on the ISS will go differently. But this is not enough to significantly affect time. We need to look at gravity. The larger the object, the stronger its gravitational force. For example, on the Moon, you can jump higher and lift heavier objects than on Earth because the Moon is light. But on Jupiter, you can barely stand on your feet because it's heavy and its gravity is many times stronger. Gravity bends space-time itself. Imagine a trampoline or a stretched sheet. As long as there's nothing on it, space-time is even and time is the same at all points. But put a heavy object there and you'll see a pit forming in it. Now imagine putting a heavy object like the planet Earth in the center of the sheet. It weighs 6 tons, plus another 21 zeros. It would bend our sheet so much that time would go differently in the center than in a place where space-time is flat. And the heavier the object, the greater the warp, and the slower time will go there. For example, near the Sun, time goes even slower than on our planet because it's more than 300,000 times heavier. Or take a black hole. Even a small one weighs tens or hundreds of times more than the Sun. And supermassive ones are millions and billions of times heavier. They will bend space-time so much that time near them practically stops. So, our hero, Sergei Krikalev, used this very method of time travel. He just wasn't at the very depth of this time-space vortex, but on the ISS. It's at a point in space-time where the curvature of the sheet isn't that strong. And time went a little faster for him than it does here. Just a little bit. And if you spend enough time there, gradually, you start to overtake the people here on Earth in time. Sergei could have gone much farther in time, but another law of physics prevented him from doing so. It's all about the unity of space and time. If you're standing, you're only moving in time. But if you run forward, you move both in time and space. The faster you run through space, the slower you move in time. The International Space Station travels around our planet at 4.7 miles per second. This speed slowed down Sergei's movement through time. So in more than 2 years on the ISS, he only traveled in time by 0.02 of a second. So here's a way that you can time travel. Seat your friend at a table and give them one watch. Put the other one on your arm and start running around the table. If you run fast and long enough, you'll notice how the time on your watch and your friend's is different. Voila! You have traveled through time. But there are other ways to get to the future. For the first way, you need to get to a black hole. The closest one is just over 1,000 light years away from our solar system. You jump into your faster-than-light spaceship and arrive there. You need to fly as close as possible to its center, to the very edge of the event horizon. Space-time is so warped here that 1 second can be equal to weeks or even months on Earth. So just wait here for a few minutes. Now, turn the hyperdrives back on and fly away. Of course, you have to be careful here. Black holes are so heavy that nothing can escape their gravitational force. Even light, which is the fastest thing in the universe, can't escape a black hole's embrace. But that's no problem for you, and you're already on your home planet. Wow, it's been decades on Earth while you've been away. There are flying cars, robots, and holograms everywhere. Another option is traveling at the speed of light. You and your friend are standing on the starting line at the stadium, and each of you has a stopwatch. Press start, you run at the speed of light around the Earth a few times and finish. Stop the clock. The time with which you ran your sprint is less than that of your friend who was standing still. But there's a so-called twin paradox that scientists are still racking their brains over. It's all about what to take as a reference point. If the center of the coordinate system is a person standing still, and the other is running at the speed of light, then the runner's clock will lag after the run, because they were moving not only in time, but also in space, remember? But if you take the runner as the reference point, it was the static person who was in motion relative to them. And then the static person's clock would have to be behind. So as a result of the experiment, both guys' clocks, the runner and the static guy, would show the same time. This is the twin paradox. Another way to cheat the laws of physics and stop the flow of time is to get into the plank position. Then time just stops for you. Okay, just kidding. Assuming that traveling back in time is possible, there's a whole bunch of problems and paradoxes. For example, at 12 p.m., you're engaged in building a time machine. At 12:30, you finish building it. And then, at 1 p.m., you enter it for one purpose: to prevent you from building the time machine yourself. Then you go back in time at 12:20, when the time machine is almost finished, and break one of its details so that it can't be built to start with. But if your younger version couldn't build a time machine, then there's no way that you could get to the past either, right? Or what if you did build a time machine and went back in time to your father when he was on a date with your mom? You ruin their date and they break up. In this case, your birth would have been impossible. But if you hadn't been born, you would never have built a time machine and gone back in time to ruin your daddy's date. And then nothing would have interfered with your birth. Wow, things are getting a little too complicated. Okay, there are simpler ways to travel through time. For example, biological ones. I'm talking about freezing. If you freeze your body, you will move through time with the rest of the world, but you'll be asleep the whole time. And when you wake up, you'll be in the future. By the way, animals that hibernate in winter, like bears, are time travelers. They simply skip the hungry winter seasons. But there's one problem with that. When we freeze, the water in our cells and tissues turns to ice, and as a consequence, they feel dehydrated, like in a desert. This can be avoided by using protective chemicals. But the hardest part is the awakening. Our scientists can't safely unfreeze a living organism. So, for now, freezing your body is a one-way ticket. But we have hope that scientists of the future will find a way to avoid damaging cells and tissues. Then, they'll open refrigerators with people and wake up a whole bunch of time travelers. And that's a pretty expensive adventure. Freezing an entire body can cost $200,000 or more. But many people believe that time travel is already real. And some time travelers have been caught in photographs or camera footage. For example, this photo from 1941. There are men in suits and women in elegant hats, and among them, this guy in futuristic glasses and hoodie. Or this video, where you can see a woman in the background, talking on her cell phone. Wow, that was about a century ago, and back then, no one could imagine what a cell phone was. Well, these facts can be easily explained. The man in the photo is wearing glasses that were made back in 1920, and the t-shirt and hoodie also already existed at that time. And the woman talking on the cell phone is actually holding an acousticon in her hand. It's kind of a hearing aid, one of the first of its kind. So we can say one thing for sure: time travel remains just a dream for all people. Except Sergei Krikalev, who was able to trick the laws of physics and be 0.02 of a second ahead of all the people on Earth.
Despite all our differences, we share one thing in common. That's right, we all feel alive and actively perceive the present in this very moment. But here's the catch, my friends. This feeling of right now is in fact a little delayed. It takes about half a second for our brains to translate information into our consciences. If you think about it, technically, the future is already done for, but we're just not realizing this in due course. And that's not all. Our different senses pick up information each at their own pace, which means our brains have to drag some of them to give us a seamless sense of the present. It's like our brains are trying to stitch together a Frankenstein monster of sensory information in real time and make it look pretty. But here's where things get really wild. Researchers have found that they can mess with this perception. When that standard delay is removed, our brains get confused, and it gives us the impression that the effect happened before the action that triggered it. It's like you'd perceive the doorbell sound, but before you'd actually push the button. Weird, right? Why are our brains so easily fooled? Well, it's because our conscious minds have a lot of work to do. We have to translate the world around us, think about what might happen in the near future, and figure out what to do next. All of that takes time, which is not great when you're facing fast-moving danger. Imagine a dangerous wild animal jumps out at you. If you have to consciously think about how to react, you're done for. Luckily, our brains have emergency response kits that kick in when we need them most. The startle reflex is the fastest response triggered by a noise or sudden movement. Within 5 milliseconds, a lot of muscles are triggered into reacting, and you're already on the move before you know it. If we have a few more milliseconds, our brains can act in a more interesting way. The amygdala, our brain's first stop shop for processing emotions, takes about 12 milliseconds to process a threat. It's not super sophisticated, but it can easily detect danger. In fact, some of our best actions are done without conscious decision-making. Anything we do in less than half a second, like hitting a ball or catching someone's glance, is done automatically. So, while our conscious minds are great for long-term strategy, some of our best actions are accomplished without it. But let's get down to the real question. Thoughts can vary. Sure, we all know that because we've lived it. Making a difficult career or parenting choice takes a lot more thinking than choosing what to top your ice cream with. But did you ever wonder what the speed of thought is? I mean, do we need a Ferrari to keep up with our brains, or can we simply stick to a bicycle? Well, some scientists have tackled this tricky question by measuring how quickly we become aware of the information we gather through our senses. Apparently, we can detect stimuli that lasts as little as 50 milliseconds. That's about 1/20th of a second, in case you're counting. Now, if we're talking about sensing and responding, let's use the sprinter reacting to the starting noise as a benchmark. That's lightning fast, taking only about 150 milliseconds. However, the speed of our nerve pathways can put a damper on our speedy thoughts. Back in the day, scientists estimated that it took 115 feet per second for information to travel down our nerves. But thanks to modern research, we now know that some well-insulated nerves can move at up to a whopping 394 feet per second. That's comparable to a bunch of the world's fastest cars in the world, like an Aston Martin or a McLaren. When you put it that way, the speed of thought is pretty quick. But don't worry, you don't have to train like an Olympian to keep up with your own brain. You might have even stopped to think about how many thoughts you have in a day. That question counts as a thought too, you know. Spoiler alert, it's more than you think. From the moment you wake up to the moment you fall asleep, and maybe even after that, your brain is constantly churning out thoughts. Some of these thoughts might be simple, like, I need to do laundry, or I should call my mom. Others might be more complex, like, what's the meaning of life? Or how do we love? Believe it or not, a study conducted in 2020 found out that an average person has over 6,000 thoughts per day. That's a lot of thinking. The study used brain scans to track when new thoughts began while participants were either resting or watching a movie. But not all thoughts are created equal. Some thoughts can make us feel happy and excited, while others can bring us down and cause us to worry. For most people, those negative thoughts can be hard to shake. Also, Did you know that your personality can affect how many thoughts you have? People who are a bit more on the jittery side tend to have more thoughts than those who are calmer. But don't worry, having a noisy brain doesn't automatically mean there's something wrong with you. Sometimes our brains can even produce intrusive thoughts that are disturbing or upsetting. While it's natural to have these kinds of thoughts occasionally, if they're happening frequently and disrupting your daily routine, it might be worth talking to a professional. So, where do all these thoughts come from? Your brain's nerve cells or neurons are responsible for communicating with other cells by generating neurotransmitters. This sets off a chain reaction of firing neurons, which then creates thoughts. But what if you want to change your thoughts? It's possible. Techniques like mindfulness and working with a trained specialist can help you address unwanted thoughts and give you a more relaxed state of mind. Our brains are somewhat similar to the muscles that help us move around. We can train it to make our lives better. To an extent, that is. At the end of the day, it's not the number of thoughts that matters, but how they affect you and what comes out of them. Speaking of weird stuff brains can do, some mind-blowing news just hit the scientific community. Researchers have discovered some weird brainwaves in octopuses. Yes, you heard that right. These 8-armed wonders feature a type of brainwave we've never stumbled upon in the animal kingdom. Now, before you go imagining little octopuses wearing tiny shower caps with electrodes sticking out, let me tell you how this discovery was made. Scientists surgically attached electrodes to octopuses' brains and were able to get a glimpse into their thought processes. The amazing project captured the first ever brain recordings of octopuses that can move around as they please, and the results are mind-bending. The researchers discovered that some of the brainwave patterns are much like some found in the human memory center. This suggests that convergent evolution may be at play here. What does convergent evolution mean, you might ask? It's when two different animals end up having the same trait, even though they don't share a recent common ancestor. Another similar example of convergent evolution is that of dolphins and bats. They both use sound to figure out where they are, but their environment couldn't be more different. Octopuses have been considered fascinating by scientists and non-scientists alike. From their remarkable memories to their ability to camouflage themselves, these creatures are nothing short of incredible. They've been known to use objects to solve problems, and they even dream. Yeah, you heard that right. The color ripples that we can see across their skin as they sleep can show us that they may be dreaming too. However, octopuses are notoriously difficult to study. They can touch every part of their body with those long arms, which means they may have no problem removing whatever tracking objects scientists might have placed on them.
The year is 2045. You arrive at the airport and get your face scanned with a biometric device that replaces your ID or boarding pass. Friendly robots pick up your luggage and direct you to your gate. You do some duty-free shopping in virtual reality and get in line to board the Flying V. You've picked your favorite seat in the second cabin. In there, you can choose between a staggered seat or a bed, even in economy class. You're walking past the group seat section, where friends and colleagues can spend time together face-to-face and discuss things. You're on a long-haul flight today, so you went for a bed to get all comfy on your way to your destination. With the Flying V, you can't choose to sit over or by the wing because all the passengers sit right in the wings of the plane. The cargo hold and fuel tanks are also in there. The plane looks like an arrowhead, with two wings stretching out behind the cockpit in a V shape. The oval cabin is pressurized and has an aerodynamic design. Everything inside the plane is made as light as possible. Thanks to it, it's more fuel efficient than other aircraft. The idea of this new revolutionary plane came to a student who was working on his thesis at Berlin's Technical University. It was further developed by the Delft Technical University in the Netherlands and supported by KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. They decided to make long-distance flights more sustainable. The Flying V shares many characteristics with the Airbus A350, the most advanced aircraft as of 2021. It can also seat 314 passengers and take up 1,700 square feet of cargo. It's smaller and shorter than the A350, but has the same wingspan of 213 feet, slightly longer than the height of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It means it can fit in the same already existing gates, runways, and hangars at airports worldwide. It has less inflow surface area, which means less resistance. Less resistance means less fuel needed for the same distance, 20% less than the Airbus A350 to be precise. But it gets even better. KLM plans to make it completely emission-free with electrically boosted turbofans. They also believe they could keep manufacturing costs pretty low compared to other unusual and efficient new designs with unique components. Experts tested a 50-pound, 10-foot scale model of the new plane in July 2020. They controlled it remotely, and it successfully took off at a rather low speed, but had a rough landing. It means there's still work to be done to make future flights comfortable for all passengers, including those sitting close to the side of the aircraft. Airbus has spent months testing another unusually shaped plane. It's just 10 feet wide. That's about 3/4 the length of a Volkswagen Beetle. It looks like a flying wedge and could start a revolution in the aerospace industry, improving environmental performance. They believe the remote-controlled Maverick with a blended wing design has great potential. The fuselage in regular planes is basically useless weight and needs massive wings to stay aloft. With the new design, the whole airframe gives lift. It means the plane can be lighter and smaller and still carry the same weight. One prospective problem with Maverick could be boarding and leaving the aircraft. The wide central section could slow it down, and passengers in the middle would be far away from emergency exits in case they need them. At the same time, it would give passengers additional legroom and larger aisles. Another Airbus invention is an XLR plane with a third fuel tank that will travel up to 10 hours without the need to refuel, or 5,400 miles without stopping. That's 1,000 miles more than other narrow-body models. Boeing has spent years working on its own revolutionary concept, the transonic truss-braced wing. This plane has folding wings that are 170 feet long, longer than an average commercial plane. It's possible thanks to the truss used in plane construction that supports the extra-long, ultra-thin wing. It also makes the plane more aerodynamic and allows increasing its cruise speed up to some jetliner speed. The new design is going to need 9% less fuel than regular ones. It could even run on battery power for short-range flights and partially use electric power to get the needed thrust for longer distances. Switching to a gas and electric battery hybrid would help make flying cheaper. A Denver-based startup named Boom is determined to produce the first civilian supersonic jet after the collapse of Concorde almost 2 decades ago. They're partnering with Rolls-Royce to develop the engines for the future plane. It would fly at twice the speed of sound, but would be slower over land. It would still take passengers from the East Coast to London or from the West Coast to Asia in half the current time. They promise the fares won't be much higher than regular business class tickets, with an added bonus of oversized windows for all passengers. Boeing designed the biggest twin jet in the world for long-distance international routes, the Boeing 777X. It's meant to carry between 384 and 426 passengers and will have a unique folding wing. It will bend up at a right angle to fit the wide body into tight docking spaces at airports. The plane will have a wider cabin, dimmable windows, and supersized overhead bins. Some designers and aircraft engineers have been experimenting with plane concepts with no windows at all. One of them is called Ixion and has cabin walls lined with flexible high-definition screens, projecting 360-degree real-time video footage of what's going on outside the aircraft. 2 cameras mounted on the jet's wings would capture the image. The screens are supposed to be low voltage and powered by solar panels on the plane's roof. They could also use parallax technology to split the screen and let passengers see different views at the same time. 2 strips running along the jet's body would fit the air conditioning and cabin lighting. Windowless private jets of the future could have high-definition screens programmed by passengers using their mobile phones, letting them choose what they want to see on each side of the jet. Removing the windows would reduce the weight of the aircraft and give more flexibility to the jet's interior design. It would also minimize engine noise by insulating the fuselage and also make the aircraft safer without the holes needed to install windows. The only exception would be the conventional window in the cockpit for the pilots. Airbus plans to reimagine the plane's interior with zones for passengers to do different types of activities. An area for business meetings, another one for socializing or playing virtual reality golf and other games. The screens in the social area could be connected to passengers' gadgets, letting them control what's on the screen and give presentations. They could also include a revitalizing zone where passengers can sit back and chill in a smart seat that will offer various pleasures, from a mechanized massage to aromatherapy. There will also be more planes with individual sleeping cabins, showers, and bar areas, and even full-size in-flight spa zones. Airbus is planning to build beds for economy-class passengers in cargo holds. They will be passenger modules of the same size and shape as cargo containers. Airlines will be able to load them aboard for long-haul flights and take them out for shorter flights or when they need extra cargo space. The modules will look somewhat like upscale hostel rooms, with all surfaces in glossy white and curtains for privacy. Economy class passengers will be able to rent one of the beds for less than the price of a business class ticket. They'll be able to stay there at all times, except for takeoff and landing, or rent a bunk for half of the time on flights of 12 hours or longer. Large aircraft already have bunk beds for crew members downstairs to let them rest on long-haul flights. They could also use cargo holds to host lounges, conference rooms, medical suites, and play zones for the youngest passengers in the future. Swappable modules could replace regular seats. Some airlines are experimenting with a meet and seat program. It lets you share your social media profile with other passengers on your flight. You can pick someone to sit next to based on your professional or personal interests, or just your likes. This option could spread to other carriers in the near future.